The biggest news for veterans benefits being impacted is without a doubt the firing of about 80,000 employees, a little bit more. And what we're going to do is listen to what the VA Secretary himself, Doug Collins, has to say here on Fox 5. And full disclosure, I have not seen this video myself at all. So you're going to get a very raw new reaction. Okay. Before we start, I do want to say one thing because I don't want the video to kind of influence here's my presuppositions. Okay. I do not see how firing 80,000-ish employees will not have an effect on VA benefits, right? For disability claims specifically, does that mean longer wait times, less VSRs? I mean, we don't even know what positions were deemed, non-mission critical. So everything is up in the air, and we can't trust anything, right? Because the firing of probationary employees started out as performance-based, but then it wasn't performance-based. It was only because they were probationary, but everyone kept saying it was performance-based. So there's a lot happening right now. So let's just go ahead and see what Doug Collins himself has to say here on Fox 5. And then I'll give you my genuine thoughts on this.
Welcome back to Fox 5's On the Hill Live this Sunday morning. The Trump administration plans major cuts at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. It could mean 80,000 job losses or 15% of the VA workforce. This could hurt America's veterans, or is it necessary to get the deficit under control and improve services? We're pleased to welcome the U.S. Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs and a former U.S. veteran, Doug Collins, on the Hill this morning. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being with us.
It's good to be with you.
So obviously, when the headlines hit, it made a lot of people apoplectic. 80,000 people. That's 4 Capital One arenas at capacity. Right. Who are these workers? How will this affect veteran care? Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about.
Tom, thanks for that. Let's put this in perspective. For the last 10 years, the VA healthcare system has been on a high-risk list for GAO. 10 years. There's some out there that want to think that before we got here and started actually looking at this, that the VA was perfect and everything was going fine. It really wasn't. 10 years being on a high-risk list. So when you look at this, you take a step back and you say, what are we doing and how are we doing it effectively? And one of the things we're looking at here, and this is,
real quick, he keeps saying the GAO list, meaning high risk. What does that mean? High risk for what? High risk for waste? High risk for a inflated budget to get out of control? What does that mean? If you know what that means, please let me know in the comments. But that's something that was kind of brushed to the side there that I'm lost in the sauce, to be honest with you, on that one. And of note, and I'll say this, he asked specifically for veterans care, healthcare focused. We see a huge push into community care. I'm pretty confident in community care. We'll have to see what that looks like, obviously, before we kind of double down on that. But what about disability benefits or education benefits? There's many arms of the VA here.
As you talk, you see numbers being thrown out there. Mm-hmm. This is a deliberative process that's going to be going through, in which we're actually going to take and look at our healthcare system, look at our benefits, and say, what do we need to be doing? How do we do it better? Because at the end of the day, our job is to provide services for our veterans. And when we do that, then the people are getting their benefits. And also at the same point, then maybe we can take a honest look at what GAO has already said, being on the high risk list puts us at risk for fraud, waste, and abuse, puts us at risk for having patient care and quality go down. So that's what we're looking at.
Who are making these decisions, though? Because as we spoke to Congressman Harris just a minute ago, that's a big question for people. Folks voted for Congress. Yep. They voted for the president. The president chose you. Who's actually, at the end of the day, making these decisions?
I am. And our team is making the decisions. And I think that's what I want everybody to understand. Quit worrying, quit being spun up by what we're seeing in the media. People wanting to talk about, well, this agency behind the scenes, this somebody's pulling the curtain over here. Because what we're seeing is we're getting recommendations.
Really quick, and this is obvious, but I do want to say this myself. Doug Collins is taking responsibility for what happened at the VA. Okay, so firing of employees, effects or no effects to healthcare or benefits. He's standing up and saying, it's right here, put the blame on me.
But at the end of the day, I was the one that raised my hand. Ours is one is the secretary, and the president made it very clear just the other day that we're making the decisions going forward.
You did something this past week that maybe some of the other secretaries might want to do, and that's you wrote an op-ed
Yes.
in the Hill detailing a lot of this. And one of the things you wrote was that the goal of the VA is to reduce levels to 2019, roughly 398,000 employees from our current level of 470,000. But we also added here, and we didn't hear a lot about this, the department is going to continue to hire more than 300,000 mission critical positions to ensure that health care and benefits for VA beneficiaries are not affected. 300,000 people are a lot of people. So what are those jobs going to be? And are the people who are being laid off going to be eligible, or would they be properly in a place to fill some of those?
Well, this is something I think we need to look at here as we look at this. And that's
a great question.
The number that we're talking about, that's 300,000 we protected. So all the people out there who are saying, the VA cuts, and there's been 2,400 layoffs so far at the VA going forward, that we're having this fundamental depression in VA healthcare and VA benefits. I want to put this in perspective. That's 0.5% of our workforce, 2,400. And they were all in what we call non-mission critical assignments. So those 300,000 we protected.
When you were in the House, you were probably the best person to cut through what I call bureaucraties. Okay, when we say non-mission critical, what are you talking about there? What are people doing that they shouldn't be doing?
Well, just in some of just to give you some examples of job descriptions, we had clerks that were in the back. We had interior designers. We had staff that was duplicative in certain agencies. From again working in the back rooms of areas. One of the things that we were finding is that people who are frontward facing, those who are actually helping the veteran, taking the calls, also doing the benefits, are not being cut. They've not been touched. This is another thing to realize. Did you realize in the last 4 years, the budget at the VA went up $130 billion, and we added 80,000 employees? And actually what happened in that time is as our backlog on benefits actually went up.
One of the reasons it went up.
Okay, real quick. Everything he just said is true. It's framed a way, and that's why I want to address it. So yes, the VA's budget has increased from 2017 to right now a lot. Okay, it's almost doubled, and I want to say more than doubled. Actually, I can't remember off the top of my head. Which is a problem. It's not just like, if it keeps going that way, it's not going to be sustainable. Period. But he does say something that the backlog has still went up, although the VA's budget is a lot more. There's a lot of reasons for that. The main one being the Pact Act. So how he said it that way, and I am a fan of Doug Collins, I don't think it gives. He's giving a very bad front when it comes to why the budget has increased. In correlation with the backlog of claims increasing, is because the Pact Act came through and basically blew the VA out of the water. They weren't really postured to handle not just the care the Pact Act offered, which was a lot more, but also the VA benefits claims. And then that made tons of veterans eligible for VeteranAI, that made tons of veterans eligible for Chapter 35 if the Pact Act brought them to P&T, things like that. So what he said is true, but there's more between the lines as to why the backlog has increased. And it's because of the Pact. More veterans are eligible, you're going to see more claims, hence the backlog's going to rise. And so just because the budget rises doesn't really necessarily mean or strongly correlate, definitely no causative relationship there, that the backlog should decrease at all. I would actually argue the opposite. Anyways, here he is.
Up was the Pact Act. This was the promise to address comprehensive toxins, passed in 2022. This was about the burn pits.
Yep.
These large areas of garbage that were just set on fire to dispose of it because, there were military troops around them. They inhaled it, and it was connected some illnesses as well too. What would the status of the Pact Act be under this initiative?
It's still going to be fulfilled. I'm actually, for those out there wondering, I'm actually one of those burn pit people. I've actually was served in Balad in Iraq and right next to a burn pit. And what the Congress did is actually pass law. We're going to continue to fulfill that mission. But sometimes what we have found is that you use something like the Pact Act and say, well, we're going to throw money and people at something. But at the end of the day, are we actually making the cuts and make it in a way that actually helps the veterans? So the Pact Act is going to get implemented. We're going to do that just as we're supposed to.
No surprise to you. You've had your critics about this in the
I'm confused. I don't know why he talked about Pact Act and cuts there. That seemed like a talking point that just didn't fit the conversation. I don't know. I want to know your thoughts on that interaction specifically. But hey, the Pact Act's not going anywhere. This is great news. Okay, absolutely great news. We already knew that, but there was definitely some headlines and articles out there saying the opposite. Here you go. Secretary, Doug Collins himself says the Pact Act's not going anywhere. It would be really hard to get rid of legislation. It doesn't just happen like that.
Administration. Patty Murray, who's the top Democrat on the Senate Appropriations, said that this is a full-scale, no-holds-barred assault on veterans. Even Jerry Moran, who's a Republican chair, senator and Veterans Committee, says they need to legislate necessary changes. There have been some in Congress saying, hey, what about us? Or are we part of this? Does the House and the Senate have a role in all this?
Well, I think they have a role in it, but like I said, I encourage them to be a part of the process and to work with us and see what we're doing. Again, I have to emphasize 0.5% of the workforce. That's what we're looking at. This has only been in the process the last 3 weeks. Anything that's coming up to say that we're all of a sudden changed, I just happen them the same members of Congress who've been there for a long time. The last 10 years, we've been on a high risk list.
This has always been a tough job,
Yes.
being Secretary of Veterans Affairs. You get a lot of criticism, not only from the...
This is way out of my wheelhouse, but the VA operates under congressional approval or authority, right? The budget, the Pact Act, like it's not the VA's Pact Act that was passed and litigated for, lobbied for, and against through Congress, signed by the presidents. I'm not a big fan of the VA making it seem like they're operating autonomously apart from Congress. That I don't like at all. And it's surprising that's coming from Doug Collins because he was a representative, right? Was he a rep or a senator? One of the two. He was in Congress. Okay. Anyways, I don't know how I feel about that, but it's not good.
Public, but from veterans themselves are frustrated about some of the bureaucracies they run into. What is your North Star as you begin this job now? You've served yourself. You've seen these veterans. You know their stories as well. What do you want to do?
The North Star here is this, and it's something that most of these members who actually talk about this, 60% of their complaints in their offices have to do with the VA, through benefits or healthcare. My job is to make sure that the VA is not an agency in which someone has to call their congressman or their senator to get the help that they've already earned. If we get to there, then our function is being properly carried out for the first and most important function, and that's our veteran.
What has the president had said to you as far as your marching orders in regards to VA?
It's very simple. He said, take care of my veterans. That's all he said.
When you now enter this job, is it something
I mean, those are obviously scripted, whatever.
that you do in regards to your own experience, or do you have to approach this also as an administrator and a secretary as well too?
All in one. And I think the one thing that I brought to this job is actually saying that I'm going to ask questions that hadn't been asked, because I'm going to come into this. I don't view this as a career or stepping in the sense of saying what do I do next. Mine is what I do now. So I'm asking, why are we doing this? Don't bring to me we've always done it this way before. Bring to me answers and solutions, because again, when GAO puts you on a list for 10 years of healthcare that you're at a high risk, when you look at the situations going on and how we're actually developing, VA has been, as you actually alluded to, we've been the whipping post for a long time. People want to say good things about veterans, but then say, well, you got to fix it. You can't fix it without changing it, and that's where we are.
Government
That's a good point.
Things taking care of veterans might be at the very top of that list. Doug Collins, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, we appreciate you coming in.
Okay. I will say this. His closing statement right there is, the VA is not perfect. Veterans know that. If you're watching this and you're a veteran, you know the VA is not perfect. And if nothing changes, then nothing's going to change. So I'm still a big fan of Collins. There are some things I disagree with. Obviously, the firing of probationary employees, not a fan at all. There was no notice. That's a whole issue in itself. I still don't see how firing 80,000 employees, he made it seem like it'll be backroom employees. I don't think so. I guess we'll have to wait for the fire to start, the fire to go down, die down, the dust to settle, to see what the effects of healthcare, of disability benefits, just benefits in general, like education, and then obviously cemetery affairs. But yeah, that's all I got. Let me know your thoughts on this interview here from Fox 5 on the Hill and Doug Collins.